In closing, Minister.
Contributed to this debate on this legislation, and also thank those members who did request a briefing, which was all of the CLP backbench and also the member for Johnston. Thank you for coming in and having a briefing with me today. I also note that you brought Dr. Cassie Wright from Menzies along, and that's the second time I've met with Dr. Wright, and she has a wealth of knowledge in that research space. She's given me a lot of information about alcohol and the policies. Myself and the member for Johnston had a chat about that today as well, and of course the member for Health and the Alcohol Policy Minister was doing a lot of work in that space as well. What I would say, Madam Speaker, though, is that whilst the Leader of the Opposition did start this debate with all sorts of crazy words, she didn't request a briefing from my office. So it just goes to show that actions speak louder than words, and those that show up are the ones that change the world. Madam Speaker, I'll also highlight just a couple of the things that were said during the debate. I mean, you yourself, the member for Araluen, you talked about the alcohol being like community leaders and the decisions being made by the people in the community on the ground. And I think that's a really good point, to have these local plans in place. And of course, Alice Springs knows all too well the horrors of when alcohol policy has failed, and it goes on for years and years under the previous Labor government. So I think that's a really valid point that you make. And the fact that the liquor accords down there are really active. It's not like that in all the places in the Northern Territory, but Alice Springs does have an active liquor accord. There was a number of members that mentioned that. And, you know, those arrangements that happen under those accords are voluntary, and that's okay. The government doesn't need to intervene with that, which is part of the point. It's all local, it's all community-driven, which I think is excellent. Interestingly, the member for Gwoja was a very tempered speech today compared to what I have experienced over a number of years with the member for the Gwoja has come to this parliament. And I kind of feel like maybe he was sort of showing the Leader of the Opposition how to be an opposition that had their butts whooped last year. You know, maybe that's him saying, maybe we need to be a little bit downplayed in this whole argument, seeing as we failed over a long time, and let's show Territorians that we can be humble in opposition. We don't have to fight every single thing. So, interestingly, member for Gwoja sort of showing his colours there in a different light, which was very fascinating for us on this side of the chamber. The member for Fong Lim, his interesting comments about, you know, whose data is better, and we hear a lot of information about a lot of data, and there's, you know, it's been a long time, over many years of experiencing this cherry picking of data from all sorts of different sources. But I think the data that speaks the loudest is what the member for Blaine talked about, and that is those smashed glass bottles in our playgrounds every single day for councils to pick up.
Opposition Leader.
She's just getting all twitchy now over there because I mentioned the member for Gwoja and how he might be trying to take her job. Very interesting, Leader of the Opposition. Maybe you should be a bit humble. Territorians wanted this to go through.
Opposition Leader, silence. Let the Minister speak.
So the data that speaks louder than words is what Territorians want, and that is... It's the best evidence and the best data that you can get is what Territorians want.
Okay, take your seat, Minister. All communication will come through me. No interjections. We'll listen to the Minister in silence. Please continue. Attorney General.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So, Madam Speaker, the minimum unit price, which took effect on the 1st of October 2018, has not demonstrably reduced the harms associated with irresponsible consumption of alcohol. The House will be aware that for many years the Northern Territory has had the highest per capita alcohol consumption rate in Australia. This is not a distinction of which we are proud of, and this government remains committed to addressing this issue. The minimum unit price applied exclusively to takeaway alcohol and was intended to deter the consumption of low-cost, high-alcohol content beverages, such as cask wine. However, rather than achieving its objective, it drove excessive drinkers towards higher alcohol content products, such as spirits and pre-mixed drinks. Wholesale supply data indicates that around the same time the bill to introduce the minimum unit price for alcohol passed, there was a notable shift in consumption patterns. Since the introduction of the minimum unit price, sales of standard spirits have risen by 17%, while sales of pre-mixed spirits have increased by 36%. Madam Speaker, interestingly enough, the alcohol-related assaults right across the territory increased over 8 years by 38%. In Darwin specifically, it was an increase of 56%. In Palmerston, it was 95%. In Katherine, it was 97%. Tennant Creek was 43%, and of course your hometown of Alice Springs was 33%. The shift in those alcohol-related assaults and the shift in the sales towards harsh spirits and pre-mixed spirits demonstrate that the measure failed to curb harmful drinking patterns and alcohol-related assaults, basically encouraged a consumption of stronger alcohol. And you only have to walk around the public spaces like the member for Blaine talked about, in our playgrounds and our parks, to see that impact. The minimum unit price did not stop problem drinking, it merely changed what was being consumed. And instead of plastic and cardboard cask wine boxes, we now see broken glass spirit bottles littering our public areas, which highlights the policy that's backfired, exacerbating safety concerns while failing to reduce harm. And unfortunately, Madam Speaker, we've seen glass bottles break as is a weapon of choice in some cases for some horrific instances that have occurred. Madam Speaker, the increasing cost of certain liquor products has not dissuaded determined drinkers from acquiring alcohol, and it is well documented that some residents in remote communities have been willing to pay exorbitant prices for alcohol, demonstrating the policy's ineffectiveness in addressing underlying consumption patterns. For example, in communities like 𝙗𝙻𝙻𝙗, where a bottle of Bundaberg rum has been sold for up to $500, despite the median weekly household income being just $1,096. This black market surge highlights how the MUP has failed to curb harmful drinking behaviours. Madam Speaker, there was no significant decline in emergency department presentations in Darwin and Palmerston following the introduction of the minimum unit price, and research was also unable to identify any significant decreases in alcohol-related harm in Katherine and 𝙗𝙗. Further, in Alice Springs, where some reductions were observed, evidence suggests that the key factor was not the minimum unit price, but rather the role of police auxiliary liquor inspectors, or PALIs as we know them to be, which are stationed at the bottle shops, and a number of members here spoke about that today. The minimum unit price legislation has not and does not mitigate alcohol-related harm. If it had been effective, the Northern Territory would not have remained the only jurisdiction in Australia to have implemented such a measure. The absence of similar legislation elsewhere in the country underscores its lack of efficacy. The policy didn't reduce alcohol consumption. And Madam Speaker, I just want to point out one more thing that I didn't mention before about some of the contributions, was when the Leader of the Opposition talked about how that we should introduce an indexation of the minimum floor price instead and consider that option. But it's interesting that there was a long time between 2018 and last year, when you were still in government, that you didn't introduce that. So it was like a half-baked effort to try and make a policy sound great but not actually have any impact. Madam Speaker, we went to the election very clear about our intention to repeal the minimum unit price. So that is what we're doing here today. And this is not just about lifting price restrictions on alcohol. It is about taking a smarter, community-driven approach to tackling alcohol-related harm. We will focus as a government on the demand of alcohol, not just the supply. And this government will continue to work on reducing crime, rebuilding the economy and restoring our way of life. To ensure that any issues arising from the removal of minimum unit price are addressed, we will have routine reporting that will continue to monitor alcohol-related harms in the community. We will also continue to work with licensees and other relevant agencies to support community-driven efforts and minimise alcohol-related harm through demand and harm reduction strategies. Of course, we've already mentioned the local liquor accords, who the government does support, who play a key role in managing alcohol-related issues in the community. By engaging key stakeholders such as local businesses, law enforcement, community groups and health professionals, these accords can create tailored, locally driven solutions. And these partnerships will ensure that alcohol sales are managed in a way that reflects the specific needs of a community. Additionally, we must remember that Section 113 of the Liquor Act provides for the Liquor Commission on its own initiative to vary the conditions of licences where necessary, which further strengthens and safeguards against alcohol-related harm. In other words, if someone is doing the wrong thing and selling things that are outside the law, they will be dealt with under those Liquor Commission laws. So irrespective of individual views on this matter, it is undeniable that many Territorians enjoy consuming alcohol responsibly. Indeed, the Territory is renowned for its vibrant social culture and enviable lifestyle, where socialising with friends and family over a drink is a valued tradition, and there is nothing wrong with that. Having a beer at the pub with mates or sharing a bottle of wine over dinner are part of our Territory lifestyle, and we don't believe the government should get in the way of that. In any case, the vast majority of the population consumes alcohol responsibly and should not be subject to the impact of the actions of a small minority who engage in excessive drinking. Scrapping the minimum unit price is a line in the sand, Madam Speaker. It demonstrates that this government will not settle for the status quo. We will not keep doing what's been done before and what's been done over the last 8 years. We will keep delivering real, meaningful change. So, Madam Speaker, I move that the bill to remove the provisions relating to the minimum unit price be read for a third time.
The question is the bill be now read a second time.
Oh, second?
Yeah. Sorry. You say that.
Sorry, I'm not sure which script I'm reading. Madam Speaker, I seek leave to move the third reading.
No, if you could say, I seek leave,
Sorry, this is wrong. Am I moving?
I seek leave that the bill be now read a second time. If you could say that, please.
Madam Speaker, I seek leave that the bill now be read a second time.
Okay. The question is the bill be now read a second time. Those of that opinion say aye. To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. Division? Is there support for a division?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. A division is called. of the division is 17 in the negative. Oh, sorry. 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 My apologies. 17 ayes. So the ayes have it. Correct? So I probably need and then 17. And 7 noes, yeah, okay. Minister?
Madam Speaker, I seek leave to move the third reading.
Sorry, Minister? The clerk.
A bill for an Act to amend the Liquor Act 2019 and the Liquor Regulations 2019.
Minister?
Madam Speaker, I seek leave to move to the third reading.
Is leave granted? I think the noes have it. So we will move to consideration. We move to consideration in detail now.
Order. The Assembly will consider the Liquor Legislation Amendment Repeal of Minimum Pricing Bill 2024, Serial 10. Is it the wish of the Assembly that clauses 1 to 13 be considered together? No. No. Could people indicate if there's any particular clauses? 1. Any other particular clauses? No. Okay. The question is that clause 1 stand as printed. Those of the opinion say aye, to the contrary no. No.
Oh, sorry.
Leader of, so,
All right, sorry.
Leader of the opposition. Sorry? So I'll go again for clause 1 just to make sure. The question is that clause 1 stand as printed. Those of the opinion say aye, to the contrary no. I think the ayes have it. The question is that clause 2 stand as printed. Those of the opinion say aye, to the contrary no. No. Leader of the opposition.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Minister, can you speak to the commencement date for the legislation, please?
Yes, that'll be the 1st of March 2025.
Minister, have you already created communication packs for the industry around these changes?
Yes, we have.
Any further questions?
Thank you, Mr.
No. Okay. So the question is that clause 2 stand as printed. Those of the opinion say aye, to the contrary no. I think the ayes have it. Are there any other further clauses that people want to question? No? Okay. Is it the wish of the Assembly that the remainder of the bill be taken together? No? Okay. So, are there any particular clauses, I ask again?
Yes, Mr Chair, we're looking at, it's under section 5, but I'm just working off one screen, so I just apologise what clause number it is.
So can I assume you're looking at clause 5?
Yes, part 2, sections 5A. Clause 7, that's repealing that part of the Act. We understand that from the opposition. Minister, my question is, in doing so, who led the consultation for this repeal?
Thank you, Leader of the Opposition. You would know that we took this to the election, which is what we've spoken about during the debate. Licensing NT was able to ensure that this change could happen, and I thank that department for working really hard with the industry to ensure that we could get this happening quickly.
Thank you, Minister, but who was consulted for the process?
We took this to the election, so every Territorian who tuned into what was happening in the election would have heard about this. We meet regularly with Hospitality NT and Licensing do as well. We have a really good relationship and have done for a very long time with the industry who were well on board with this happening.
Thank you. You mentioned Hospitality NT. Was that the now Chief of Staff? Was he part of that process of the consultations?
We've been talking about removing the minimum and floor price for a very long time. The Hospitality NT, no matter what its form, has been supportive of this right up until very, very recently.
Thank you. Can we specifically name who was part of that consultation with Hospitality NT?
There's a number of board members at Hospitality NT and all of them have been in my office and we've had meetings. They are fully aware of this, along with not just that group but also other bottle shop owners and publicans and people who are involved in this industry.
Thank you. So was that consultation, because you've mentioned talking about leading into the election with constituents, so was that done before the election or after the election?
We have been talking about repealing the minimum floor price for a very long time, watching the alcohol-related assaults increase. So this consultation was done with a lot of Territorians. Didn't matter what you did, they all wanted to know about what was happening with it. So it was before the election, it was post-election, and it was right up until right now when we're talking about this bill.
Thank you. So do you have a list of people, peak bodies that you'd met with, that you'd consulted with?
There is a huge list of people who live in the Northern Territory who have been consulted about this. There are 250,000 Territorians, I believe, that live in the Northern Territory. A lot of those voted. A lot of those voted for the plan that we put to the policy, and the minimum floor price scrapping was part of that plan.
Thank you. So outside of obviously constituents that come to vote on the election day, you did mention that there were particular groups that you'd met with, such as Hospitality NT. Do you have a list of such groups that you've consulted with?
I think I've answered the question.
Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Chair, further to the member for Daly's question, Minister, you mentioned a peak body that you consulted with. Did you consult with health experts as well in your decision to repeal this part of the legislation?
I spoke about Dr. Cassie Wright in the speech that I just delivered, who came into my office twice this week, which was really helpful. So yes, there were people throughout the health department, as well with Mr. Minister Edgington, who's our health minister, plus other people. And people have been writing to me about the minimum floor price since the election, both people who were for it, people who would like to caution us on those results and those changes. But at the end of the day, we took this commitment to the election. The Territorians voted for us overwhelmingly. That's why there's 17 people here, and that's why there's only 4 Labor members. And so we're delivering on our commitment, and that's exactly what Territorians expect of us.
Member of Gwoja.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And my question, Attorney, is in relation to that you've mentioned that you did meet with the doctor. You've done it 3 times, I think, this week, twice. And just wanting to highlight that that's obviously since the development of the bill has been undertaken, so no further changes could have been done because that Cabinet would have approved it and it's been drafted. I guess the question is, can you confirm if there were any meetings with health professionals in the development of the bill? And if so, are you able to provide written advice or verbal advice here today who they were?
I've answered that question a number of times now.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That was a very direct question, and you haven't answered it. The question was very clear. We've heard in the speeches...
Sorry, Member for Gwoja.
Thank you. We had heard a number of speeches here today talking about a letter that was written, a response that was 3 lines from the government. Just wanting to ensure the question appropriately is asked, that there was consultation done with health professionals around this bill.
Point of...
Standing Order 158, no repetition. This question has been asked and this question has been answered. Can we move on, please?
Thank you.
Thank you, Member Daley. You want to speak to the point of order?
This is a separate question that it's asked, so it hasn't been answered. He's talking about health experts.
Look, I'll give the member for Gwoja another chance to continue.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I very much appreciate the opportunity. I was just making a point or asking a question to the attorney. You made reference to meeting with a health professional twice this week. Obviously, that's post the development of the bill. It was just a simple question. Had health professionals been consulted and advised outside of the election cycle in the development of the bill? And also, in relation to that, was the Department of Health consulted extensively on the impacts, given that a number of hospital presentations in relation to this?
Thank you, Member for Gwoja. I have answered that question, but we did receive lots of letters after the election about this particular issue. We absolutely would have had time to make changes throughout all of those meetings, including the I had this week and last week with health professionals. So I think I've answered your question.
Right. Member Daley.
Thank you, Chair, and through the Chair, and thank you for your answer, Attorney General. So you have mentioned that you've received a number of letters regarding this legislation. So the question is, can you provide a list of those people that have sent those concerns or those letters on? Thank you.
Point of order.
This is the same question, no repetition. The question has been answered. They may not like the answer, but it's been answered. Can we move on?
Look, I think the member for Daley is asking a new question. Continue on.
Thank you. So I've already asked the question, so I'll give it to the Attorney General.
I've already answered this question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you'd stated before, that this is a new question, and then the Attorney General has then come on to say she's answered the question, but she hasn't answered the question. So the question was, she had stated that there's been a number of letters sent to her regarding this legislation. So we have the right to ask the question of who those letters came from, and can she provide a list of people that wrote to her?
Point of order. Member Buck.
Standing Order 109, this is getting argumentative. The attorney has said that she's answered the question. He doesn't like the answer. Now it's turning into argumentative. Under Standing Order 109, it's time to move on.
I'll give Member for Daley one more chance.
Just speaking to the point of order, 109 replies to question time, the point of order. So that point of order is irrelevant to consideration in detail, so you can't consider that. But I have asked the question that the Attorney General said herself she's received a number of letters in regard to this legislation, so she should be able to provide that to the Assembly.
Look, I hear what you say, but I also hear that the Attorney General has said she's answered this question many a time. I think it is now time to move on. Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. New question. Attorney General, how many public consultations were held to repeal this Act?
Okay, I'm going to say it again, just because you don't seem to be understanding. We took this commitment to repeal the minimum floor price to the election,
That's not
like an election commitment. So it doesn't matter what we have done between that point and now. We committed to Territorians that we would repeal this legislation. That is exactly what we're doing. And all Territorians, no matter what industry you work in and what you do, had a chance to have their say about the minimum floor price. during the election period, post the election period. This bill has been sitting on the table, notice paper, for at least 30 days for that opportunity. I have answered this question.
Thank you. Look, I'll just remind members, and the clerk has reminded me, this is consideration of detail. We're looking at the operational matters in the clauses. We don't need to drift back into policy and so on. So if we've got specific issues on the clauses, that's fine. Are there any further questions? Okay, no further questions. The question is that clause 6 stand as printed. Those of that opinion say aye. To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. Thank you. There was, Member Gwoja, you said clause 13 was an issue. Is there any other clauses? Clause 7 as well? Okay. The question is that clause 7 stand as printed. Those of that opinion say aye. To the contrary, no. Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Attorney General, clause 5, which is around repealing part 5, minimum pricing. Is there something that will be replaced through policy or regulation?
No.
Mr Chair, Minister, will there be any safeguards around alcohol policy and management around harm reduction because of the repeal of this section?
That's not relevant to this clause.
Mr Chair, it's repealing a whole section which provides the response around alcohol minimisation and harm reduction. Is there something else that will replace that for Territorians?
Minister, last chance.
Mr Deputy Speaker, this is not a relevant question to this clause.
Okay, so I think the Minister's expressed the view.
Is the answer that there's no harm reduction policy by the government?
I think the answer was that it's irrelevant.
We just had hours and hours of debate of all the things that the government will be doing instead of this. So that does not go to this clause, but you just heard the whole debate.
So I think the Minister's stated clearly, so we're not going to repeat that question.
Thank you, Mr Chair. The opportunity to understand what that is and why it wasn't, nothing else is now in place. I do want to correct the record to the Attorney General. There was a request from my office in writing via email on Friday the 7th of February 2025 at 1:06 p.m. that was specifically asking for briefings for the Liquor Legislation Amendment Repeal of Minimum Pricing Bill 2024 as one of the requests, an email by me. So I just want to put that on the record and correct that on behalf of the Attorney General and her assumptions that we did not request a briefing and there was no reply to that request.
Right. So if there's no further questions, I'll put the question again. The question is that clause 7 stand as printed. Those of the opinion say aye. To the contrary, no. Aye. I think the ayes have it. Any other further ones except 13? Okay. Is it the wish of the Assembly that clauses 8 to 12 be considered together? There being no objection, it is so ordered. The question is that clauses 8 to 12 stand as printed. Those of the opinion say aye. To the contrary, no. Aye. I think the ayes have it. The question is that clause 13 stand as printed. Those of that opinion say aye. To the contrary, no. Member for Gwoja.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Attorney, I just have 2 questions in relation to clause 13, which is the repeal of the minimum pricing unit and then the commencement of the Liquor Legislation Amendment Act 2024. Minister, are you able to confirm if there will be a review period on this particular piece of legislation, if there's a review period built in or if there's a review period that Cabinet have determined around this legislation? And further to that, Minister, I'm just inquiring how the government will measure this legislative piece of reform to if it's been successful or not.
Thank you for the question. The part of the Act, in Part 4, Clause 13, to repeal the Act, basically says it repeals altogether. So the review mechanisms are the same as what it would have been in the previous Liquor Act, so there's no changes there. And your second question around how we would measure this. This is the work that the government is doing, is looking at all of these impacts to all of the policies that we've seen over a long period of time, and it's the work that will continue under this government.
Thank you. Attorney, I guess the question that I am asking is, you're making a legislative change because you believe that you have a mandate and a reason to look at and be able to see statistics change because of this. So where would the opposition, crossbench and independents be able to look at to monitor this legislative change to see if it's taken effect? And I just point out that you've called a point of order, but the attorney has answered in part the question, so it would be up to her, Deputy Chief Minister, to respond.
Deputy Chief Minister.
155, this discussion has got to be confined to the clause. We're talking about policy, and the opposition can go and talk to anyone they want to about how it's measured. It's up to them. The government will do their bit. This is not confined, so 155 is not relevant.
Look, I agree with the point of order. As we said, we've got to stick to the actual clauses. Are there any other further questions, Member for Gwoja?
Mr. Deputy Chair, speaking to the point of order, I haven't been asking a policy question, Deputy Chief Minister. You may wish to pay attention. Mr. Chair, I was asking the government, and the attorney was responding in part how they were measuring the success.
Deputy Chief Minister, point of order.
Chair, you've made a decision. You said moved on. This is a 155 again. This is not confined to the clause. You made a decision, yes, and yet the opposition...
You are correct. And as I ask now, I ask the member for Gwoja, do you have another question, please?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Attorney, thank you for your response around that information. But again, just if you could further elaborate on the response that you have provided, how are you physically measuring the success or the failures of this particular legislative policy change?
155, this is the same question. This is repetition.
Sorry, Deputy Chief Minister, I'll just give the Minister one chance to answer.
I do feel like I answered that question before.
Thank you. Okay, so I think we've got enough of that.
Yes, Attorney. So just confirming that you stated, as it was in the previous legislation, the same review mechanisms remain in place, but there is no measure to determine whether or not this legislation has been successful or not.
Minister.
Thank you. I feel like I've answered the question, but I'll add some more to help you out. I'm not trying to be trying to hide behind all this at all. So please don't think that's what's happening here. I will say that, like I said in my speech, which in my summing up speech, that routine reporting will ensure that alcohol harms in the community are continued to be monitored, which is a bit the same as what I said before. The government will continue to work with licensees and other relevant agencies to support community actions to minimise the harms caused by the consumption of alcohol through demand and harm reduction strategies. Of course, during debate we spoke about all these other things like the liquor records in your local area as well. So we will continue to monitor those impacts. We still have crime stats which go up every month. We have hospital presentation stats. There's a whole heap of measuring of data that we can use.
Thank you. Through the chair, as you responded, then you're looking at how you measure it. I guess what I'm ascertaining is from elected members who have spoken in here today, with this single change, what are the key performance indicators, may you have, that you're going to use to say whether the repeal of the minimum unit price has worked or not? Because how are you going to be in a position to say that this particular level of antisocial behaviour or alcohol-fuelled violence is down because of this? How are you going to measure that?
I've answered the question.
Through the chair, so there is no mechanism in place to measure.
Thank you, Member for Gwoja. Look, I think the Minister's answered it. I'm going to put the question. The question is that Clause 13 stand as printed. Those of the opinion say aye, to the contrary no. The ayes have it.
Point of order. Mr. Chair, just for the cause of ensuring that we run smoothly through each of the clauses, like there should be an opportunity to allow for other questions and not just put, unless you ask the opposition of the day. No, you didn't. You said you're going to put the question.
Well, I take it that I'll put the question and we'll go on with it. Thank you. So the question is that the bill be agreed to? Those of the opinion say aye, to the contrary no. Aye. I think the ayes have it. Division? 2? Okay, division.
Ayes and 7 nays. The ayes have it. Minister, you have the call.
Madam Speaker, I move the bill now be read a third time.
The question is that the bill be now read a third time. Those of that opinion say aye. To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. Division? The division is supported. Ring. Of the division is 17 ayes and 7 nays. The ayes have it. Clerk?
A bill for an act to amend the Liquor Act 2019 and the Liquor Regulations 2019.